I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is scientists have figured out what was going on with those sawfish that were spinning around in Florida in the water earlier this summer and dying. They figured it out. They kind of know what it is, but they also don't know what the cause of it was, like in terms of why this actually happened. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast, so stay tuned and let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And I have to tell you, it's Monday. It's the first day of the week. Well, I guess technically the second day of the week, but I was up north at a cottage with some friends. We played some golf. We were able to play some ping pong and just kind of catch up with a lot of friends that I haven't seen in a long time. It was the most beautiful weekend I've seen up in where I was in North Bay. It was 28 degrees, 26, 27, 28 degrees. It was absolutely gorgeous. Kind of scary though, in September up north, where you actually have this type of weather, this warm weather. Not something we want in the long term, but it was kind of nice to enjoy, I guess. I don't really know. Anyway, I digress. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think is really interesting. We know what was causing the sawfish and other fish to die, and what was that behavior where sawfish were actually spinning around in circles and then dying. We know what caused it. We don't know how it happened, but we know what caused it, or the complex that caused it. And we're going to talk about that today, which I think is really, really important. But first of all, I want to just tell you, I am very close, very, very close to finishing up the changes and the final touches on a community app that I am building with somebody that I'm paying to build. It's going to be a great app where you can come on the app. You're always going to get the information as long as you go on the app. There's no algorithm like on Instagram or on Facebook or on TikTok or anything like that. I'm going to be sharing information. You could join for free. There are going to be some paid options if you want to support the show, or you want to look for something like maybe some careers or something like that. There'll be some paid options, but it's free to join. You can interact with other members. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't have to go on social media all the time. I know a lot of people are trying to get off social media, so you can actually join me and talk. We'll do some Ask Me Anythings. We'll have some of our guests on that have been on the podcast before and on this to do some Ask Me Anythings. I'll share extra information. It's going to be a great time. So keep an eye out for that. So the way to do that is you sign up for our newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com, all one word, /newsletter. There's a link in the show notes or in the comments or in the description. Wherever you are, there's going to be a link and you get to check it out, and I'll give you updates on what it looks like and what happens very, very, very soon. Okay, so when it comes out. So that's it. So let's get into the show, because I'm so excited. This is going to be something that we've been waiting to hear about for quite some time. There was a very disturbing behavior in the summer where these sawfish and other fish were like spinning around in circles and then just dying. It was very, very weird. Sawfish are part of the endangered species list, and they're critical. There are two populations, one in the Bahamas, one in the U.S., this population anyway, this species. And, the bigger population is in the U.S., but it's still a problem, and it's something that we need to figure out to protect them. A lot of people are doing some great work in Florida as well as other places to be able to protect them. So keep an eye out for that. But this story came off of National Geographic, which is really great to see that they're updating us on this. I've been looking for this for quite some time. And so over the summer, actually they said I think it was in November 2023, maybe it was earlier than that. There was this, a whirling in circle, like a phenomenon of this whirling in circles, usually until they died. Scientists later record the phenomenon in more than 80 different species, including parrotfish, bull sharks, and Goliath grouper. So, this affected a lot of fish. There was an investigation. Water samples were taken where these fish were dead. There were a lot of samples analyzed. There were fish that were analyzed, and the results were really quite interesting. It was more than so. What they were worried about is like what was causing it. They thought it was a toxin. Where was this toxin? Where was it coming from? Where was it going, and how was it going into, how was it being absorbed, and where was it actually affecting these fish? So it says, after testing hundreds of water and fish samples, the experts concluded the symptomatic fish died from combined exposure of multiple toxins, possibly originating from multiple species of dinoflagellates. It's a type of macroalgae, essentially. So microscopic algae, so like a phytoplankton, right? Under normal conditions, these dinoflagellates in question live on seagrass or larger algae on the seafloor rather than a free-floating water column. But some as yet unknown driver, possibly heat, maybe a storm, even a mix of events, caused the dinoflagellates to leave their hosts and move upward into the water column. And according to Alison Roberts, who's a marine scientist who studies harmful algal blooms at the University of Southern Alabama's Stokes School of Marine and Environmental Sciences and the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, said it's just really rare. We've never really seen that. This is what we have to work out in terms of why, like what's happening here. What's happening in general. Wasn't red tide. We know that it wasn't red tide, which is a bloom of toxic dinoflagellates, and dissolved oxygen, salinity, pH, and temperatures were all within normal ranges and not suspected to be that cause. The initial breakthrough came from Michael Parsons, a marine ecologist who studies algal blooms at Florida Gulf Coast University, revealed that the levels of water samples showed higher than normal levels of the type of seafloor dwelling dinoflagellates in the genus Gambier discus. Sorry, having trouble pronouncing Latin names and apparently speaking. So Gambier discus is the genus name. Now this algae produces a neurotoxin called ciguatoxin. And so people who eat seafood that are infected with ciguatoxin or the neurotoxin experience like ciguatera, which is like a condition that causes vomiting, nausea, neurological symptoms. So not great. So that was the biggest lead that Alison Robertson said they were going with because of the human health implications. They were worried that people were eating fish that had this ciguatera and they didn't want them to be sick. But there were no cases that they really saw, I think, that had this. So they didn't find many toxins in the muscles of the symptomatic fish, but their livers, which is the organ responsible for filtering out the impurities, were chock full of toxins, ranging from ciguatoxin to a variety of toxins produced by dinoflagellates other than the Gambier discus genus that I just mentioned. So in terms of the crux of it, it was not just ciguatoxin alone, based on the evidence that they've seen, but it's, something that could be a combination of these neurotoxins that would cause them, or these toxins that would cause these fish to display such a behavior. Now, some algae produce multiple toxins, so it's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship. Now, so the sawfish were hit hard, and the thinking around this was sawfish don't necessarily hang around in the water column. They hang around on the bottom. If you actually look at a sawfish, it's a flat shark, what we call. So it looks like a bit of a between a ray, a bit of a morph between a ray and a shark, and like, a buddy of mine and co-host at the Beyond Jaws podcast calls these guys, Dr. David Ebert calls these guys shark rays, or flat sharks is what they call them, flat sharks. So essentially what they do, these flat sharks lie on the bottom of the ocean and they lie on the seafloor where these the ciguatoxin dinoflagellates kind of hang out, the Gambier discus. And so when they actually surf, like they swim along the bottom of the ocean, and they use that rostrum, that big saw-like sort of appendage, and they start to sift through the bottom. Now that could have disturbed that algae that was in that area, and then it got through the gills as well as into the liver. That's where the sawfish had these dinoflagellate and the toxin in. So, these are 16-foot long sawfish. They use the saw to hunt, catching other fish and crabs and more. So, it made sense that this dinoflagellate that hits on the bottom, stays on the bottom, is getting disturbed. It kind of floats up a little bit and it gets into the gills and it gets into the liver. And that's why we probably saw, high concentrations of toxin-laden water that passed through the sawfish gills, causing the neurological impacts that we saw where they were spinning in circles. Concerned about the fish's future, in spring 2024, for the first time in U.S. history, scientists launched an emergency effort to rescue critically endangered sawfish impacted by the spinning phenomenon. On April 5th, they successfully rescued a distressed sawfish and began rehabilitation effort in Mote Marine Laboratory and Aquarium in Sarasota. However, the animal did not survive. But reports of alien sawfish then declined, and so we started to see less and less cases. But we're hoping that we'll be more prepared when we start to see these cases again. And because we know that it's multiple toxins, maybe we can know how to treat it better when they fix it, when they see it next time, if they see it next time. Now, there could be a lot of things that cause this, and I mentioned them before. It could have been heat, it could have been a storm, it could have just been disturbance in an area, and there was a lot of dinoflagellates for that area. Some of the water samples, or many of the water samples, didn't display any heightened dinoflagellates or heightened algae in the samples. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, though. So there still needs to be more research and more investigation for this phenomenon and for what happened. But this is giving us a little bit more of an answer of what happened to these fish and what could happen in the future if we're not careful. Now, the biggest thing right now is to find out what happened, piece those items together, find out what the cause of it was, and how these dinoflagellates got into these fish, right? And these aphis, where are they? Were they all in one area? Was it all over the place? How was it disturbed? How was the bottom disturbed, if that's what the case was for the sawfish? And a lot of questions and a lot of answers. I'm sure it'd be great graduate work or a great research study to happen in the future, and I'm sure that's going on right now. So we have a lot of people that are involved in this, which is great. I'll find out if I can get more of an update. I'm working on getting an interview with Michael Parsons, who did a lot of the analysis. So we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get Allison Robertson on the show as well. But that's it for today's episode. I hope you got some answers. I'd love to hear your comments. You can comment on Spotify. You can comment on YouTube, because this episode's going up on YouTube as well. And of course, if you want to get a hold of me and you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anything else that's not video, it's all the audio related, just hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. And of course, don't forget, I know a lot of calls to actions here. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter, speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And you can get access to a lot of different news that's coming out, but also you get access to when this app is coming out. I can't wait for it. It's going to come out within the next month or so. So looking forward to that. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.